Hi guys, my name is Vanessa Smedley and I'm a painter. Today we are going to paint a watercolor of this lovely scene of an Oklahoma lake at sunset. And if I haven't mentioned it before, Oklahoma is actually where I'm based and where I'm from. So my brother sent me this picture again, and I guess he's okay. Just kidding, I have really awesome brothers. Just don't tell them I said that. Anyways, let's see how this goes. For materials today, we have Arches paper. It's cold pressed, 140 pound, and it's on a block. For paint, we have the Winsor and Newton Professional series. We have the Winsor and Newton Designer's Gouache in white to add some details. We have a number 6, a number 8, and a number 12 round. We have a 1.5 inch Hake, which I've been lying to you this whole time. It's not a 1 inch, it is a 1.5 inch. We have my cheap chisel blender for putting on the masking fluid. We have this really old stiff acrylic brush. It has paint all over it, so I can't tell you what kind of brush it is or what size it is, but I'm using that to lift out. We have an X-Acto knife, just a plain old X-Acto knife. A utility knife would also work, or a box cutter probably. And then we have Pebeo Drawing Gum. Again, don't use your good brushes for this. Use a cheap brush and dip it into dish soap before you dip it into the drawing gum, or it'll ruin your brushes. And a spray bottle. I want to make sure and protect the sun and this really bright reflection here, so I'm masking this area out just a tiny little bit. And then I begin mixing. So I start out with neutral tint, then mix a little bit of cadmium orange and then a little bit of cadmium red to that. And then I do the same mix but darker. And here I mix cadmium free orange and a tiny little bit of Winsor Violet, which is the same thing as dioxazine purple. And then I mix up some cadmium free yellow just by itself. Next we just have some Cobalt Blue, and then I mix Sap Green with a little bit of burnt umber. Then I finish out my mixing with just a nice dark neutral tint. I start out by wetting the entire sky, and then I begin dropping in some of the Cobalt Blue and then some of the neutral tint cadmium orange and cadmium red mix. I'm using my Hake brush for this because I find that it just has a really nice smooth blend on skies like this. Here I add in some Winsor Violet by itself, and then I began to drop in the cadmium free orange and Winsor Violet mix right here around the sun area. Then I add a nice generous dollop of cadmium free yellow here right around the sun and start to spread it around. I've added a mix where there's a little bit more of the cadmium free red into one of these oranges, and I'm adding that in. It has cadmium free red, cadmium free orange, and Winsor Violet, and I'm just adding that into little areas here and there, adding some more of the darker neutral tint. Then I mist the whole area with my spray bottle in order to keep the washes moving, and then I began to lift out with a damp brush, my little chisel blender in fact, some wispy little clouds. And now I'm darkening up some of the Cobalt Blue and just adding little details here and there to get this where I want it. Then I lift out more clouds with a damp brush and decide to let it dry after that. Now that I've let that completely dry, I'm using my very old, very stiff acrylic brush. I have it damp and I'm just lifting out some more cloud areas here. I want this to be very wispy and light. here I decide to tape the horizon line so that I can get a nice, even line on this lake. So then I wet the entire area underneath the tape so that I can begin dropping in all the same colors from above underneath. So I start out with the brightest of the oranges and then just begin working my way out. Eventually we're going to have some land masses and some vegetation here, so I drop in the green that I've mixed so that there's a little bit of green there for that. And then I begin dropping in some pretty dark neutral tint in the area where the land masses are going to be, making sure to miss all the areas that I want there to be highlights in the water, and I just drop that in and let it spread. And here with a damp brush, I'm lifting out some of these ripples in the water. And then it's time to take a break and let it all dry. Now that this entire thing has dried, I have removed the tape, and now I'm coming back in with a rubber cement eraser and I'm removing that tiny little bit of masking fluid that I added in there to protect the sun. And here I just add that cadmium yellow in and around the sun, and then I dab a little bit out because I still want it to have kind of a white heat. Then I continue using my very old stiff acrylic brush to lift out some highlights on the water here. Then I mix up a thicker consistency of my green mix, and I'm turning my brush on its side and doing a dry brush technique here. If you need to know how to do that, click the link above. Now we got to work on the reflections, so I continue to dry brush some of that green down below. It's time to start pushing this darker, so I get a very dark consistency of the neutral tint, and I'm beginning to add that in with a number 8 round brush. And I'm using short, quick strokes to mimic ripples. And now I'm beginning to add some of that very dark neutral tint up into the trees because all of this is very nearly silhouetted. I mean, it does have a little bit of green in it, but it's mostly black. Where it recedes into the distance, I'm making those a little bit lighter, and then as it comes closer to the viewer, I'm making that darker because that's just how it would appear in nature. To the human eye, things get lighter as they recede into the distance. In photographs, things don't always look quite that stark of a difference in the distance, but as artists, we can use a little bit of creative license and we can make things farther away appear lighter, and that helps to create a sense of distance and perspective in our paintings. And here I'm using a damp brush just to lift a tiny little bit of ripples out of that dark area. I have let that dry completely, and now I'm coming back in and I want to darken up this green here. It's still just a little bit too light. It definitely needs a little bit more of a silhouetted effect here, so I'm darkening this up. You may be wondering, what exactly is Oklahoma known for? And other than tornadoes, Garth Brooks, Reba McEntire, Blake Shelton, reservation dogs, and Tiger King, it's also known as the place where all of Bob Dylan's archives are kept. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, there is a place called the Bob Dylan Center, which houses over 100,000 items spanning Dylan's career, including manuscripts, notebooks, correspondence, films, videos, photographs, artwork, music, all of it. It is quite the archive. Not that Bob Dylan was from Oklahoma, but somehow that collection ended up in Tulsa. There's also the Woody Guthrie Center right next to that, which is the same kind of thing for Woody Guthrie. Only Woody Guthrie actually was from Oklahoma. Another well-known musician from Oklahoma is Leon Russell, who started the church studio back in the 70s in an old church in Tulsa. And people like Willie Nelson, Eric Clapton, Bonnie Raitt, and my very own personal favorite, Tom Petty, all recorded there in the 70s. Now I'm using my number 6 round brush and adding in a little bit of Cobalt Blue and Winsor Violet for some ripples. Then I get out my white gouache and add just a touch of that in the center of the sun and a little bit on the reflection. Now I've gotten out my X-Acto knife and I am scratching some highlights on the water. Now I use an X-Acto knife, but you could probably use a utility knife, a box cutter, maybe even a razor blade for this. I've got my ruler out and I'm using that for the horizon line as well, to scratch underneath it. I find that this is such a good way to get a sparkling effect on any body of water. Just be sure that when you do this, you only scratch the very top layer of paint off of this. You don't want to go too deep and cut your paper. Now, there's not quite enough contrast for me between the sun and the sky around it, so I'm coming back in with just a little bit of that orange to darken up the area around the sun so that it'll stand out a little bit more. And I blend that in with a little clean water around the edges. And here's the finished product, all dried and the tape removed. And I really hope that it brings up great memories of you and your granddad going fishing, like it does for me. I mean, if you did that, I guess. And there you have it, a lovely Oklahoma lake scene at sunset. I can hear the cicadas and feel the mosquitoes right now. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff, because that's how this channel gets to grow. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.